So, friends, we wrap up our 4-week sermon series on the Enneagram. Hopefully, you all have enjoyed this journey. For those of you who this is exciting and new information, that's great. For those of you for whom this is not your cup of tea, thank you for your indulgence. Hopefully together, at the very least, we've spent some time appreciating the diversity of how God creates us as human beings. And if nothing else, I hope this has been a time for you to be curious of how God made you and how you can be the best disciple, the best friend, the best spouse, the best parent that you are called to be. So again, just as a reminder, we introduced the Enneagram at the beginning of this month, and then these past several Sundays, we've been going through the three triads. We started with the gut triad with types 8, 9, and 1. And then last week we moved on to the heart triad with types 2, 3, and 4. And then today we finish things up with the head triad, which are types 5, 6, and 7. I wanted to remind us of this great quote by Richard Rohr that I think really embodies the heart of the Enneagram. I've shared it the past few weeks, I'll share it again. Richard Rohr said, "We thought we came to God by doing it right, but lo and behold, we come to God by doing it wrong and then growing." That's what this Enneagram discussion is all about. So as a reminder of the different types, number 1, we have the perfectionists. Number 2 are the helpers. Number 3, the performers. Number 4, the romantics. And then starting off with today will be number 5, which are the investigators. Number 6, the loyalist. Number 7, the enthusiasts. And then the other 2 types that we started off with, which are number 8, are the challengers, and number 9, the peacemakers. So today, we end up our sermon series on the head triad, which are types 5, 6, and 7. And these are numbers that are driven primarily by fear. Remember, we think of fear as a bad thing, but as a reminder, fear is like any other emotion. It is neither good or bad. Fear is a very important thing, right? Fear of crossing the road without looking left and right is a pretty good fear to have, right? Because hopefully that keeps me from getting hit by a car. So again, fear is not necessarily a bad thing. 5s tend to externalize their fear. 6s tend to internalize their fear, and 7s pretend that they have no fear at all, which is why they're called the enthusiasts. So 5, 6s, and 7s tend to take in and relate to the world through their minds. They are the thinkers, and they plan very, very carefully before they act. So starting off with type 5, which is the investigator. Or as Elizabeth Orr calls it, when intellectual maximalism meets emotional minimalism. Qualities of a typical 5 are this. 5s are curious and analytical. 5s probably know every obscure Wikipedia page known in existence. 5s seek knowledge and understanding above pretty much anything else. And also 5s are known to really value their privacy and their independence. So at their best, Enneagram 5s have a really good balance between observing the world and participating in it. As I said, type 5s have a depth of knowledge in several areas of their lives and live in an abundant world. At their average, type 5s have a scarcity mindset, and they can be known for hoarding time, space, and affection, and they can carefully measure how much time they spend with others to kind of protect their emotional energy. And at their worst, when 5s are having a really bad day, they can have a very defensive personality and separate themselves from their family and from others. I start off every Enneagram type by talking about how important they are and what gifts they bring to the church. Type 5s, as I mentioned, above anything else, are driven by a sense of intellectual curiosity. The other thing is 5s can remain objective in almost any circumstance. And 5s are masters at analyzing any situation and can bring a wealth of knowledge to almost any conversation, any conflict, any context. Those are the gifts of type 5s. But as we've learned, hopefully over the past few weeks, every type's greatest gifts are also their stumbling block, and vice versa. So some of the stumbling blocks for a type 5, as I said, they really like to observe the world and to analyze it and to gather information. So they love to observe, participate, maybe not. In their search for knowledge and living, sometimes type 5s can almost live inside their head. And of the types, can be one of the types that are most out of touch with their emotions, just because they tend to operate most comfortably from here. And the other thing that 5s can get hung up on is they can see the world, with good reason, as intrusive, overwhelming, and draining. Can't we all feel that from time to time? Yeah, but 5s especially can feel that way. And because of that, they can be incredibly protective of their privacy, of their emotional and mental energy. And that kind of drive for privacy can sometimes, if they're not careful, can be a barrier in their relationships. Now, if you're a 5 that leans more towards your neighbor, the 4, you're probably a little bit more creative and sensitive, empathetic, and can be a little bit more self-absorbed. If you're a 5 that tends to lean towards your neighbor, the 6, you're probably a little bit more private, anxious, skeptical, and cautious. In times of stress, if you are a 5, you can go to the unhealthy tendencies of Enneagram 7s, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. You can become disorganized and distracted. But if you're a 5 and you're having a good day, you're taking care of yourself, you can take on the more positive attributes of an 8 and become more spontaneous and outspoken and physically present. If you are a 5, these are your opportunities for spiritual growth. Step outside of your comfort zone. We all need to do that from time to time, but especially 5s. The other thing that 5s need to know is that you don't have to have an answer for everything. If you don't have an answer for everything, you don't look foolish. You look human, just like the rest of us. Allow yourself to be extravagant from time to time. Do something unpredictable. Hang out with the 7, which we'll get to here in a second. And explore the gospel of abundance and not scarcity. As Ian Crone puts it, what if 5s trusted that there is more enough to go around in this life so that they could give that away? Now, each step of this sermon series, I've selected a stress song and a health song for each type. My health song for an Enneagram 8 is The Logical Song by Supertramp. If you grew up in the 70s, you probably remember the band Supertramp and that song, The Logical Song. Also of the 70s, I believe, was a little band called Pink Floyd. And my stress song for an Enneagram 5 is Money by Pink Floyd, kind of that scarcity mindset. And when it came to a Bible character that I wanted to select for a 5, I had to choose my dear friend and colleague, Thomas, who is often called what, Thomas? Doubting Thomas, right? Thomas needed that information when he, in the Gospel of John, was presented with the prospect of the resurrection. Thomas initially said, no, the Wikipedia page for this does not check out, right? He said, what? I need to touch what? Jesus' hands and his side, his feet. I need to have that information to believe. And to Thomas's credit and Jesus's credit, Jesus said, here, touch my hands. I think Jesus knew that Thomas was an Enneagram 5 who needed to have that information. So Even though he gets that bad moniker of Doubting Thomas, let's be grateful for the fives in our life that help us to explore the world and have that sense of holy curiosity. All right, next, second to last is number 6, or the loyalist. Loyalists, as Elizabeth Orr puts them, who needs trust when I've got projection? Typical qualities of an Enneagram 6. They value community and loyalty above all else, which is why they get their name, the loyalist. The loyalists are full of doubts and questions, so maybe Thomas was a 5 with a 6 wing. Also, the great thing about type 6s is they are great troubleshooters. At their best, 6s are productive, logical thinkers who have learned to live with unpredictability. On their average, 6s will question almost anything that you put in front of them. And at their worst, when they're having a really bad day, 6s can be painfully anxious and even paranoid. They can really struggle to trust themselves or others. The gifts of type 6, the reason the world and the church needs type 6 is that my friend Lyle Gwyngarity, who created A Sanctified Art, describes 6s as the glue that holds institutions and families together. They stick around and are loyal to a fault. They do not leave town when the going gets tough. They are also great problem solvers. If something could go wrong, a type 6 has already thought of it and planned accordingly. And as I said, they are full of doubts and questions. Their stumbling block is also that they are full of doubts and questions. Fear and anxiety can become paralyzing for a 6. As Ian Crone puts it, 6s never learns when they're growing up to connect with and trust their inner guidance system, their GPS, if you will. And this can become a barrier in their relationships of any kind. If you're a 6 and you lean towards your neighbors to the 5, you're probably a little bit more introverted, intellectual, cautious, and self-controlled. If you lean more towards your 7 wing, you are more animated and adventurous. If you're having a bad day and you need a Snickers bar and you're a 6, you can take on the unhealthy tendencies of 3s and become workaholics and pursue material success or hoard resources. But if you're a 6 and you're having a good day and you're taking care of yourself and you've got enough sleep and rest, you can take on the positive attributes of 9s, the peacemakers. And you can be less prone to getting worked up about potential threats, and can have a little bit more of a go-with-the-flow personality. If you're a 6, your opportunities for spiritual growth is to hold 2 things in tension with one another. One, we live in a culture and in a world that's never going to let us feel safe. And we are safe. Holding those 2 things in tension with one another is really difficult but rewarding spiritual work that all of us would benefit from, but especially the Enneagram 6s. 6s really need to work on an active, regular, centering prayer life that can kind of be a buoy in this chaotic world that we live in. Practice self-trust. And then finally, the mantra of type 6s that they need to print out and put on their bathroom mirror is this quote from St. Julian of Norwich: "All will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things shall be well." Or as my wife puts it, if it's not all good, it's not all over. So my take on Enneagram 6s, their health song are "We Are Family" by, anybody remember who sang that? No, it's Sister Sledge. Sister Sledge, yeah. At their best, Enneagram 6s, as I said, are the ones, they're the glue that hold institutions and families together. So they have a really great sense of what it means to be church, what it means to be a faith family. Their stress song is a song that you may not know. It came out a couple years ago by a Gen Z artist named M. Byhold. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. And the name of the song is Numb Little Bug. You may not need to know what it sounds like, but you probably get what it's about. Somebody who's just so overwhelmed by the chaos and the messiness of the world that we just kind of become numb. Y'all, we all can feel that way from time to time, right? Especially sixes. Now, as a Bible character, who is the loyalist? Well, for me, my best guess is Peter. Peter, I think, may have been an Enneagram 6, partially because he was somebody who both trusted and was loyal to Jesus almost to a fault, but also sometimes let his anxiety get the best of him. And that's part of why I think we all relate so well to Peter. Remember, when all the other disciples were cowering in the boats in the storm, it was Peter that trusted Jesus enough to say, hey, command me to walk out there and I'll go. So he had that trust. And then what happened almost immediately? He lost it and started sinking. I think that kind of embodies both the gift and the stumbling block of type 6s. And, you know, if you're a type 6, be gentle with yourself because Jesus can work with that. And Peter went on to be the rock of the church. Finally, our last type of the Enneagram is type 7s, or the enthusiasts, or as Elizabeth Orr snarkily describes them, the paradoxical paralysis of making too many plans. Everybody loves type 7s. Everybody wants to be a type 7, except the type 7s, I will say. Typically, type 7s tend to be very bubbly, spontaneous, optimistic, almost annoyingly optimistic. Enneagram 7s crave new experiences. They want to try new things. They're the ones that will say, yeah, let's go skydiving this afternoon. You know, they're all about that, and they're driven by they do these things to attempt to limit pain or limitations, which we all try to avoid pain, right? And each of the Enneagram types do that in a specific way. That's what 9s do. They come up with plans to forget about their pain. At their best, we need 7s because they are great practitioners of joy. At their average, 7s can reframe almost anything sad, limiting, or failure in an affirming way. Type 7s are the glass is half full of the Enneagram. At their worst, 7s can be reckless, prone to addiction, and seeking instant gratification. But why we need type 7s? As I said, their optimism and enthusiasm can be contagious. They're pretty fun people to be around. They can be also the 7s that I know in my life can be some of the most resilient people you will ever meet. Another gift of type 7s is they want to squeeze everything that they can get out of life. And when they're at their healthiest, type 7s can be very compassionate and innovative leaders. The stumbling block of type 7s is they can have the attention span of a goldfish. They love coming up with plans. Sometimes they struggle to follow through with those plans. 7s can also crave stimulation so much that they can have a voracious appetite for whatever they're excited about in the moment. And like their neighbors and their 5s and 6 neighbors, 7s can be incredibly fearful. As Richard Rohr puts it, the stumbling block for type 7s is they try to imagine a life where there is no Good Friday and it's Easter all the time. If you're a 7 and you lean more towards your 6 wing, you're probably a little bit more settled and sensitive and anxious, but you know how to use charm to disarm. If you're a 7 with you're a wing 8, you are a force to be reckoned with and tend to be a little bit more competitive, bold, and aggressive. If you're a 7 and you're having a really rough day, you'll probably take on the unhealthy qualities of a 1 and become very pessimistic, judgmental, and argumentative. But if you're a 7 and you're firing on all cylinders and are doing well, you can take on the healthy qualities of a 5, which we talked about a few minutes ago, and can become comfortable with silence and solitude, and you're able to name and face your fears and can feel satisfaction in the truest sense of the word. Opportunities for spiritual growth. If you are an Enneagram 7, learn that pain is unavoidable. Pain is part of being human. Try to learn to embrace your pain and to steward your suffering rather than run away from it. As Ian Crone puts it, the healing message that 7s need to hear and believe is that God will take care of you. In other words, 7 needs to know that God is not only present with us in times of joy and laughter and spontaneity, but God is equally present in the times of sadness and pain and suffering, even the ordinary and the boring, which 7s are notorious for hating. And finally, learn to live in the present rather than avoid pain and suffering. All right, the health song, I think, for an Enneagram 7 is a little song by a band called Journey called Don't Stop Believin'. No, we're not going to sing that now karaoke style, even though I'm tempted to do it. The stress song of an Enneagram 7 is a song by a one-hit wonder in the early 90s called a band called Go West. And their one-hit wonder was a great 90s hit called King of Wishful Thinking. Again, the title is pretty self-explanatory. Go listen to it today. By the way, I've been sending out emails every Sunday afternoon with a recap with links to Spotify to all of these songs if you want to kind of go and listen to that. Now, finally, before we wrap things up, who are the Bible characters that I think exhibit the qualities of an Enneagram 7? I chose both Marys, both Mary of Bethany and Mary Magdalene. Mary of Bethany, we know from that story when Jesus was visiting with her and her brother Lazarus and her sister Martha. Martha, of course, was the busybody getting everything ready, and we need those people. If she was a type 2, we need those. But Mary had the presence of mind to know, you know what, the dishes will take care of themselves later. Not a sentence that the 2s will ever admit is true. But Mary said, I need to sit at the feet of Jesus right now and listen. Kind of had that presence of mind to live in the moment. And I also think of Mary Magdalene, who had the presence of mind the week before Jesus was crucified, dead, and buried, to break that expensive jar of nard and to anoint Jesus's feet. It was extravagant. It was spontaneous. It was something that really rubbed Judas the wrong way. But Jesus said no in this moment. This was an extravagant act of worship that was needed. I think that's Mary being a 7 at her healthiest. All right, folks. I'm sorry if this has felt like a fire hose to the face, but I wanted this to be a 4-week sermon series and not a 10-week sermon series, and I think y'all didn't want that either. So I hope you all have learned a little bit about yourself. I hope you've learned a little bit about your neighbor, those that you love. And as I said, this is all about us being the healthiest versions of ourselves so that we cannot add to the woundedness of the world. So in the name of God, the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, may all of us, God's beloved children, say, Amen.